So economic inequality, that's the public school topic, and it's relevant for so much of current events and discussions. It's seen as a major issue as we've got to reduce this disparity of income in the United States, help out those that are left behind. Stossel segment, Stossel in the Classroom, has different videos that contrast or contradict or debate each other, and so you can watch videos from different perspectives. So they have one on the housing crisis. So one view of the housing crisis, we need government to step in a much larger way. Another view, no, the government's in there too much and that's the problem. But for economic inequality, number one is housing costs. Why are housing costs so much higher in some parts of the U.S.? How is it you can rent an apartment in Tokyo, one of the most densely populated places in the world, for $300 a month? And you can't even dream of doing that in Seattle or Vancouver or much of the U.S. And of course, the reason they're cheap is that they're small, but also because there's a ability to produce a wide range of housing in Tokyo and other cities, not in U.S. cities. Healthcare costs are huge in the United States, a huge impact on low-income people, often who can't afford health insurance, don't have access to doctors. We can reduce healthcare costs dramatically, and I discussed that in my nutrition video separately. Energy costs, again, they've gone up dramatically. They don't need to go up. They should be going down. How come? Transportation costs. Anytime the trucks are stuck on the freeway for a long time in congestion, that means the goods that we try to buy are more expensive. How do we reduce transportation costs and increase safety so that people don't die on the freeways? Inflation, of course, costs everything. That's the money supply going up, the cost of goods and services going up too rapidly, and then interest rates follow that. So economics, the basics, I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can find economics in one lesson online, the seen and the unseen. But basically, the basics, there's scarcity. There's not enough of everything for everyone. Apartments are costly to build. Homes are costly to build. Land is scarce. A lot of people want it. There's vast amounts of land in the U.S., but most of it you can't get to because we don't have roads going there and we don't have water and utilities. But once you pay for the cost of electricity and natural gas getting to a new community and building out the roads and the sidewalks and all that, it's costly. So how do we lower the cost of those things so more people can afford homes? Then you have to get from there to where the jobs are. But people make choices about what to consume, and enterprises make choices about what to produce. So companies decide, what size houses to build. You may have seen this article about Los Angeles, government of California and city of Los Angeles spending hundreds of millions to subsidize housing for low-income people. One company just built a unit of 400 apartments, and they didn't take any of the government money because it came with too many strings attached. They built housing roughly at 1/2 the cost of enterprises that have taken government subsidies paid. So something is causing housing pricing to be much higher than it used to be, than it needs to be. And for people interested in economic inequality, access to less expensive apartments and housing is part of that. So there's scarcity, people make choices, choices have a cost. How much money someone spends to buy a car, that limits the amount of money they have left over to pay for rent or to put money down on a new house. People go on a vacation, they enjoy it, they have time off, but that's money they don't have to pay for a car, pay for a house. People have limited amount of time, they have to choose what they spend their time on. When we buy something, the true cost is the opportunity cost, the cost that's next on the list of things that we would have purchased with our time, with our money. So we make choices between work and leisure. How much am I going to work? How much am I going to read or learn a new language? I'm not sure that people do learn languages. They talk about learning languages. But our choice between whether we want to invest in ourselves to learn new skills or whether we want to take time off, watch television, those are individual choices people make. So when you combine the producers and the consumers, then you get the supply and demand graphs for goods and services that are available, where prices, the higher the price goes, the more people provided. Let's say people get really excited about debate and suddenly tens, hundreds of millions of young people around the world want to learn how to debate. They want to take debate lessons. Well, then the demand for debate coaching goes up dramatically. And so more people who know how to debate spend time working with intermediaries to provide debate coaching and counseling services to other people who want to learn, either in person or online. So the demand, consumers lead the economy. The demand for goods and services are incentives for producers to provide more of those services. So when you background economics, you can study macroeconomics, the big things, microeconomics, the decisions that enterprises and people make. Development economics is the study of how does India get wealthy? Why are some parts of India so much wealthier than other parts of India? What's the role of institutions and property rights and legal institutions in facilitating prosperity and economic growth? And those same questions are economic history, which was my field. The study of, France, England, Scotland, why some parts of Europe grew wealthy and others didn't, and the differentials. How did Holland get so wealthy so early when, half part of the country is underwater? The field of monetary economics, of course, is studying the money supply and, the gold standard or Bitcoin, or how you provide stable currencies. And then public choice theory is the study of government. So, for example, for these debate topics on housing policy, energy policy, transportation policy, we have policies that are expensive and counterproductive. Critics say they've been captured by special interests. Well, that's a study of public choice. You have policies that benefit, like light rail. Light rail doesn't benefit the general public. It raises costs. Buses work better for everyday people trying to get to work. But light rail has a constituency. The people who build light rail, the people who like the idea of light rail, the cities that want to have federal dollars subsidizing their light rail, like here in Seattle, where taxes on license plates fund Sound Transit that builds light rail, but a lot of that comes from the state and federal government as well. Now, their decisions are determined by the people who are excited about light rail, whereas the general public just drive in cars or take the bus and go to work. But public choice theory is the theory of how government choices are made and how economics applies to them, just like it does to a business. So you can think of an entrepreneur, a housing developer who builds houses, but the person on the city council who makes choices about what kind of houses are available, they're also an entrepreneur. They need to get reelected, they need donations, they have choices. And so the decisions that government officials make are influenced by the incentives they face. And that's what public choice theory is about. And of course, that's why that's relevant for students. And you could say, sort of crass things like follow the money. Who makes money on this? That'll tell you who is promoting it. So again, wind and solar. Well, a lot of people like the idea of wind and solar with the idea that the emissions can be reduced over time. But the big interest is going to be the people who make wind and solar, the people who invest in wind and solar, the people who sell the tax benefits from wind and solar, people who are in electric cars in the battery industry. So that doesn't make them bad people. They're just focused on the things that most interest them that affect their businesses. So overall, you have a contrast between market economies and command economies. You could say that Western Europe, America, Japan were market economies, whereas Eastern European countries under communism, the Soviet Union, communist China, they're command economies, the Soviet Union. But in reality, a big part of command economies were markets. What something like 1/4 of the food grown in the Soviet Union was grown privately by individuals, not by the big government-owned farms. In Hungary, my friend Gabriella talks about the hobby gardens. Huge amount of food was produced in hobby gardens. They were called hobbies, even though they were actually businesses, because the government didn't allow private enterprise in food. So you had a huge informal or illegal economy across these command economies that sort of ignored the laws or had their whole separate legal system. Very much in Poland, there were informal economies in communist times that produced goods and services. When communism fell, those informal parts of the economy were able to flourish. So, but command is the pretense of the top down, the president or the Congress trying to make the decisions about the economy. Now, in reality, what we actually have are mixed economies. So the Soviet Union, Communist China, Eastern Europe, those were mixed economies that had a major role for markets, though they were formally command economies with the government in charge. Similarly, the United States is considered a market economy, but is in fact a mixed economy. The federal government plays a major role in the energy industry, transportation energy, housing, welfare, healthcare. All those areas have a big part of the federal government regulating or actually owning resources. Something like 1/2 of the United States property is owned by the federal government west of the Mississippi. So west of the Mississippi, you have state and federal ownership of a lot of property. The federal government claims to own the water offshore and then makes decisions about where you can drill for oil or where you can have commercial fish farming and so forth. So we have a mixed economy, and the study, the view of the economic freedom enthusiast, economists from Adam Smith to the present, people who do the Economic Freedom Index and the Index of Economic Freedom, they say what allows human flourishing and prosperity are markets, property rights, private ownership, entrepreneurship. One of the economists makes the comment, the joke is the problem with socialism is no one knows who should stay up with a sick cow. In a market economy, it's the owner. So without private property rights, who takes care of scarce resources? You know, if you're driving around your neighborhood and you see a bunch of junk that's dumped someplace, that's often a case of property that's unclear who owns it. It's owned by the city or it's unowned and people dump garbage there. Not that they shouldn't do that, but people don't take care of things where it's unclear who owns it or who's responsible for it. So overall in economics, you've got incentive problems and information problems. So when you're on the negative and the affirmative is presenting a new plan for housing or transportation or energy, the question in your mind is should be, what incentives does their reform create? Who has the incentives to make this work? What are the information problems? Who has knowledge about how to solve this? So when, the federal government says we've got a new housing policy, we're going to help people get into homes that can't get into homes now. Well, it's hard for people in Washington, D.C. to know how different housing problems are in San Francisco versus, rural Iowa versus Seattle versus Houston. And the knowledge there is generally local, and that's why you want the decisions to be local as far as possible to resolve these issues. So then the question that the Vancouver Debate Academy in this deliberative dialogue we had a debate topic, British parliamentary debate, calling for the city of Vancouver to take a stronger role and provide housing, public housing in Vancouver. So you've got the city of Vancouver. So you've got a whole debate through American history, particularly through the Johnson administration, of the role of the federal government in housing.